I think the other thing, which is a big recruitment thing, really, and it doesn't matter whether you're working in-house corporate or you're working in agency, is sometimes with all the numbers and data points, we lose sight of the fact that there's a person at the end of every. It's a human and a human story at the end of every data point.
Welcome to the Tech Savvy Recruiter, the podcast for recruitment and staffing agency owners keen to explore the tech innovations reshaping our industry. I'm Andrew Roger from RecMate.
And I'm Belinda Kerr from Recruitment Garage, and together we're your hosts, bringing you a stellar lineup of recruitment tech and AI experts ready to help you understand and, more importantly, benefit from the increasing array of tech available to you today. This week on the Tech Savvy Recruiter podcast, we are delighted to welcome Bill Boorman. Bill is a senior analyst and writer focusing on job boards, tech and general recruitment information for the AIM Group, and he's also on the board of VONQ. Bill's one of the industry's most recognized recruitment voices on tech and AI, and he's the founder of the True Unconference series, which has run events across 65 countries. There's a few there, Bill. And he's advised many rec tech firms, including Talent Tech Labs and Recruitment Smart, and from what I can gather, numerous others. And these days, Bill spends his time helping the industry figure out what AI and technology actually means in practice, not just theory. And his goal is to help businesses and leaders make sense of what's next in the fast-moving world of work. So welcome, Bill. Is there anything else you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's good. That's good. I am essentially an agency recruiter in the beginning, going right back to when I was 16. So I spent the first half of my career in agency before graduating.
Did you say 16 you started in agents in?
Yeah.
Wow, that's got to be a record.
Yeah, 44 years ago.
Amazing. Well, let's kick off then. So, given that you have been in the industry so long, you've seen every wave of rec tech come and go. Where do you reckon today's AI, genuinely changes the game for agency founders, and where's it still mostly hype?
Right. So I think there's a number of aspects to this. So the first one is where I'm coming with like a lot of passion towards recruitment businesses in terms of how you protect the industry and how you protect yourself. But I think if we look at what businesses pay to remove friction, right? So actually hiring people, and that doesn't matter whether you're running a staffing business and that's people temporary or a full-time business, there's a lot of friction in that. AI and technology is taking that friction out by doing just a lot of the heavy lifting. Anything from things like coordinating interviews used to be, like herding cats, getting hiring managers together, getting people in the right place at the right time. All that kind of thing is really easy. So a lot of friction has come out of hiring, which means we have to reassess what the value is. Individual recruitment businesses, right? That's what I spend a lot of time doing now, is figuring out where's your actual value and what have you got, and what's your moat? What's your moat that goes around that's going to protect you as a business going forward? And I see a lot of that is, how do you turn, if you've been running a staffing company for however long, how do you turn all the data you hold and the knowledge that you have and the collected years of specializing in the business that you specialize in, how do you convert that into some new way of delivering value to your customer, to your potential customer base, and to yourself? So I'm spending a lot of time thinking and figuring that out at the moment, running some workshops in Canada and working with some individual people on just what does that look like in a recruitment business.
Yeah, and I'd love to at some point through here learn a little bit more about what you're doing with those conferences, because I'm sure that they'll be, or those workshops rather, because I'm sure they'll be amazing.
I appreciate that. So it's a mix of hands-on, and I think you said you were doing something sort of, so it's a bit of hands-on hackathon, taking pieces of workflow, right? But where I'm coming from is, I think about old school for new cool. So essentially, that I started out when I was 16. The lessons that we've learned in recruiting haven't changed. Like, the fundamental rules and the fundamental basics don't change, but the way in which they're delivered is different. So if I give you an example, some of the tech I work with, we look at things like matching software. How do you match a candidate to a role and identify opportunity? Well, there was always certain rules that we had in terms of what do you get. So things like 8 IDs, 8 identifiers of the candidate. What are they really looking for? What do they really want? And I can remember thousands of recruiters in my past kind of corporate life where you go, right, you sit the candidate down, you put the CV on one side, literally as a physical action. You say, okay, that's what you can do. That's your history. Now let's talk about you and let's talk about what you want and where you want to go. And you fundamentally get that understanding of the candidate. The same thing in the real strength in in the value that we brought as recruiters was our ability to extract a proper understanding of a job description, to actually be able to talk to a hiring manager and say, okay, you can give me a list of duties, you can email me that list of stuff, but actually my magic lies in what's behind that. What are the things how do you explain things? You're telling me you want a good team player. What does that look like in your organization? What's that person like? So taking those kind of basic old school principles, recruiting doesn't really change. The fundamentals of recruiting is a good understanding of the candidate, a good understanding of the job. When the answers overlap, when that overlaps, that a hire happens, right? That's the magic. The fact that we might be doing that through agentic agents, technology, contextual chat doesn't move away from the fundamental rules. So one of the things I'm trying to work on with people at the moment is saying, right, what's the foundation and how do we deliver them? Now, we might be delivering them in a different way because it might be digital, it might be global, we might be delivering it through an app. We might be delivering it through an agent instead of delivering it through a conversation. But essentially, we still go back to those basic fundamentals. So what I'm trying to help people to understand is what is the real strength in your business that makes you work? What are the basic rules? So what are the old school rules delivered in a new cool way, right? So how do we take getting an in-depth job description, getting an understanding of a job, and do that maybe through a series of agentic agents? Do that through a workflow, do that. And then how do we supervise that work? How do we train? How do we use data and other sources to come into it, but still go back to those basic principles of what is good? The other bit I think which is important, which is where we can extract real value, is there's value in handmade, right? I don't have to use a human, but I'm willing to pay for a human. And we're seeing this more and more in business. Although I don't need you to do that, I'm willing to pay. And what happens when you go from having historically, as a recruiter, been essential to being a luxury? And how do you project value in luxury in the way that you market, in the way that you sell, in the way that you talk to people? How do you project value to the candidate that it's worth them spending some time talking to you and doing something more than just a Zoom call, right? How do we project that value in the market? How do we get that commitment and get back to the basics of what makes us successful? So that's what I'm quite a long answer, but those are the things that I'm really thinking about at the moment, is how do you translate the fundamentals which haven't changed? My 44 years in the business, they haven't changed. Now we've got computers, we've got broader markets, do RFIs, there's all kinds of things that have changed, but still it comes back to the basic fundamental rules. So how do we keep that as a core, delivered through technology now, delivered through agents, delivered through other ways? So that's what keeps me up at night. That's what excites me and also keeps me thinking a lot, because everything's changed. And actually, nothing's changed in reality, and we have to get that in focus.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there, Bill. In terms of, if you think of the workflow from picking up a job through to post-placement care, there's 7 or 8 different milestones along that pathway, and those milestones probably won't change too dramatically.
That's the same workflow that I train an agent to do. Fundamentally, that hasn't changed.
The what probably hasn't changed. Maybe it's the who is doing what at certain stages.
It's the where. Right, it's the where, and it goes right back to when I started out. A candidate you'd get one ad in the newspaper a week because advertising was expensive, right? And somebody would have to call you with their coins in a phone box, and then they'd have to come and see you, and they'd have to fill a form in, like get a pen out and fill that form in, and that was the whole process, and that's where it happened. It happened in buildings, it happened on phone boxes, that happened in newspapers. That shifted digitally. It then moved to phones. Now it's moving into a kind of agentic AI world. It's the same thing. It's just shifting where it's happening. The same rules are applying.
Yeah, I was just talking to a client only yesterday about having the roster for the walk-ins back when I was recruiting. And he now gets maybe one a quarter that come in to the office to see if there's any work available.
Exactly right. But then I've helped build a number of staffing apps. So things like Temp Buddy that was sold to Bullhorn and a couple of others. And they were always built on how I ran my staffing offices. So I literally replicated the whiteboards that I had in the office. We actually built a healthcare agency in Milton Keynes for hiring nurses that is end-to-end done entirely digitally. Everything from the background checks, validation, certification, availability. But same thing again, the workflow was based on the whiteboards that I had in my office. The information that I wrote down, the stuff that I had. It's just that it's now got a scale that you're able to process 5 million data points instead of 5.
Yeah, 24/7.
But essentially, this is what I mean by everything's changed and nothing has. The tools and the technology and the workflow, and there'll always be a new set of recruiters who will come and tell us how it's done. Right, which is cool. That's as it should be. That's the rule of life. But they'll pretty quickly come back to say, I've just discovered this new thing. And if you ask this customer, if you do this, and if you take a job in this way, it'll work really well. We're like, yeah, seen that.
Seen that done, been there, bought the T-shirt almost.
But what it's happening is we're doing it in different places. We're doing it with different technology. We're doing it on a different scale. We're doing it on a different speed. We're doing it in different countries, globalized to where we've ever done that before, right? So I think that's what you sometimes have to deal with and deal with that scale. But the magic in what we do doesn't change. It just has an algorithm behind it nowadays.
And I was just thinking, you've been advising recruitment companies for many years, and there's probably a few errors that have been made, which you've sort of stepped by the sidelines and thought, oh, it's probably not going to work out for them because of A, B, and C. With what you have seen, what's maybe one or two of the key things that agency owners make in error when they're evaluating?
I think moving away from the fundamental, not having a core kind of guiding principle process, right, at scale. So the most painful thing I've done in my career, most kind of enjoying and challenging and everything else, is we took a 165 office business of which I was a board director, which was a company called Prime Time in the UK, which we built kind of 6 offices to 165 over 12 years I was with them. And I had to digitalize that business with a database. This is a static database. Consider it very primitive now. But I had to digitalize it from paper. And that was the most painful period. And I can remember people always thinking that people would talk to me about how could we possibly work without a paper CV in front of us. So even when they got a job board like a Monster or something like that and got a computer, they were still printing out all the CVs to look at them rather than looking at them at a screen. So I think the biggest mistake is either not wanting to continually progress in where and how you do things and the scale at which you do things, or also having too much belief that you're going to be all right all the time, particularly when you start to be successful. It's not having that central. And I think the other thing, which is a big recruitment thing, really, and it doesn't matter whether you're working in-house corporate or you're working in agency, is sometimes with all the numbers and data points, we lose sight of the fact that there's a person at the end of it's a human and a human story at the end of every data point. And I think that's the biggest thing, when we lose the human story of what is it we're trying to do here? And what's the value and what's the importance of the work we're trying to do here? When that gets lost, that's where you have that's where you start to see problems. You start to see cracks. Or over arrogance and overconfidence.
Right. And I was just reflecting there. Do you think with the new technology, AI, etc., we will be able to do more human, or should we be able to do more human?
I think we'll absolutely do more human. Absolutely more human. For a start, we've got to be responsible for delivering human AI. At the end of the day, we drive what the workflow is. We need to drive humanity into that. Now, what that should also give us is years and years of recruiting. You say to me, what's the one thing you haven't got? And I would always say time. Now, if you say to me, I'll give you that time back, that 80% of your work is doing things that you don't need to do. You don't need to run a diary anymore. Your diary can, to a certain extent, manage itself. Your emails can manage themselves. Your outreach can be done. Your matching, your screening, all the things that were time-consuming 80% of the time, task-based. And if I say, right, I'm going to take that all away from you, then if you give me time back, mostly I'm when I'm starting to now rethink about it is what am I going to do with that time? It's things I've always wanted to do, like candidate experience. I don't believe I met very few recruiters who would genuinely say, I'm not really bothered about the candidate experience. I'm not bothered about how we treat them. But we haven't essentially treated them very well because we haven't been able to deal with. We wanted to give personalised feedback, but I haven't got time. I wanted to talk to everyone, but I haven't got time. I wanted to look at every CV that comes in for every job and give it the amount of time which is fair for the amount of time they've invested in getting it to me, however that is. Right? But the volume and the ever digital hiring is just where you get job boards to people got emails, to people got phones, to they got easy apply. Volume's just increased. Efficiency has declined.
So, Bill, does that lead to, if that's the case, which obviously it is, does that then put downward pressure on price? What happens from a pricing model?
From a pricing model, I think the first thing is handmade becomes a luxury, therefore you should charge more. So that's the first thing, is having confidence in what you're doing. The other thing, and this is a really, really important point that recruitment businesses need to be thinking about. The biggest challenge facing the world in terms of employment is demographic decline. The workforce is coming apart, and suddenly we're waking up to that and we're saying, actually, there's 15 years left in the workforce in terms of, and we're going to be globally going down by millions, especially in places like Japan and other evolved countries. We're going to run out of people. As people get in shorter supply, the value of recruiting and finding right people and having the right relationship should actually increase. If you're in any business, if you're in the petrol business and Trump decides to invade Iran and that stops the oil flowing through the Straits of Hormuz, you expect the price at the pump to increase, right? So that same logic is there's 15 years, we're running out of people. There's a significant shift. If you take the birth rate versus the retirement age and people reaching, there's more older people requiring things like healthcare and stuff in our population. That means our core value in terms of what we do increases. It just means what we do might change because other things become more valuable, like internal mobility, like talent workforce, like managing talent pools, like talent management, like skills development, skills deployment, like talent intelligence. Other things increase in value within that mix that you can evolve within your business. Price only is an issue, and this has never really changed, where there isn't a differentiator between businesses. When you want to buy anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it's not, never mind it being recruitment or anything else. When you want to go buy anything, it's always about the value that you attach. What's in my budget and what do I value? What do I want? And I think what we are struggling within the recruitment industry, and this is part of what I'm trying to do with these workshops, is be able to identify actually where's our value. We knew where it was because people were very hard to get hold of. It was very difficult to communicate with people. It was very difficult to reach out with people. Now it's not. Now it's not difficult to be connected with people. Now it's not difficult to come up with candidates. Now it's not difficult to use an app to draw up a good job spec or do those things, right? It's not difficult to network and connect with 1 million people or whatever you need to do. So where's the value in my business? Where's my moat that can protect me? Well, my years and years of collecting data, the knowledge I can extract from that if I'm an expert in recruiting, talent management, talent acquisition. If I'm an expert in these things, my proprietary knowledge enables me to extract a different kind of value, which enables me to charge more for that service. That's the bit that people have to figure out, I think, is if the price drops to nearly zero, to actually attract someone and bring someone in and hire them, there's not a value in paying me more money than the zero price point. But if I can identify real value in what I do, and sometimes that means I need to go into a much narrower niche. Sometimes that means I need to invest more time in networking in order to build my network so that my relationship is stronger when you want to hire someone specialist, whatever it is. We have to figure out what our moat is and what our value is. And if we can't figure that out, we're in the wrong business. If we can figure that out, double down on that. Double down on where your value is. And don't think that means my price. It's not prices, it's value. What's your value? What do you really do that is worth people giving you money for, right? And what they used to pay you for maybe they don't need to pay you for that anymore. You've got to find something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's been interesting too, watching some of these big guys crumble recently. And I've also at the other end see some of the smaller agency owners really fly, who are using technology well. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Bill, on, given that we have all of these amazing new tools at our fingertips, what edge do you think that will give the smaller founders, or the smaller agencies, I should say?
Well, it depends how you do it. The one thing you got to remember is I think you have more opportunity to experiment and play when you're in a small business, because you don't have to ask layers of permission. You don't have shareholders to be answerable to. So I think you have more opportunity in a smaller business to try this and try and figure it out, and try and figure it out quicker, and try and figure out where's the commercial advantage to you much quicker. How do you change your workflow? So if you're running your own agency or you're running a 5-person agency and you want to try a new workflow, then you can just do that. It's not complicated. There's not layers of legal and compliance, permission, test case, come and prove the ROI. If you want to go and I think this is the time for play and experimentation and beta. And one of the things I try and get over to people is it's never finished. We never reach the end. There's another bit to do. There's something else to do. There's new stuff we can build. There's new things we can try. There's new things we can change. And I think one of the problems I see in businesses is people don't really try and change until they're faced with no other option. And that's the worst time to do it. The time when you always struck me when I do a talk, as a practical example, when the government decided they wanted to save some money because there was an economic crisis, they decided they could turn half the street lights off because they didn't need them. I was kind of trying to frame that issue from two angles. One says, okay, we've been able to save a load of money by doing this. The other one was kind of saying, why were they on anyway? If we didn't need them, why did we have them before? Was it because they were always there? And it turned out actually to be not a great idea. It brought about too many other problems. But if you try and change because you're faced with disaster, if you don't, you're pressured into making a decision which only has a smaller chance of being successful because you're driven by that survival pressure. Whereas if you're doing really well, if business is good, that's the best time to make changes, because you can experiment and you're doing it because you want to try and get something better out of it rather than because we've got no option. And if you can do that, don't wait 10 years and half the lights off. Just one day say, I wonder what it would look like if we turned half the lights off, and see what happens. Say, well, actually, it's not bad. It's all right. Why didn't we do this before?
That's such a good point. But often you get the opposite, don't you? It's like when we're really under the pump, it's like, oh, what can I do? What can I change? When what you're saying is, and I agree, it should be the opposite. But I think sometimes when things are doing, we get complacent.
Yeah, when our business is going really well, that's when we should be looking at change and play and what can we do differently and what do we work differently. And I see that problem quite a lot with businesses when you're talking to them and they'll go, yeah, everything's going great. And you go, okay, what are you going to change? It's like, oh, probably not. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Okay, so we'll wait till it breaks then? Is that the plan?
I think you said earlier in the conversation that one of the biggest challenges is for recruitment firms to think it's going to be good because it's good now, it's going to be good next week, it's going to be good next year, and it all lines up.
There's a few constants we have to be aware of, right? So a good friend of mine, Peter Hinton, wrote a book, which I love. I can't remember what the book's called, but Peter Hinton, he's out of Kent. He's my guru. And he talks about this time as being, we're in a constant state of crisis. So we could go back, we could say, well, we had COVID, and then we had the Ukraine war, and then we had Israel, Gaza, Middle East, we had Trump, we had sanctions, we've had, potentially other outbreaks. The one certainty that we have is there's always going to be a crisis you're dealing with. And it might be different and it might come from, but there's always something impacting your economy or your GDP or the broader market that you're working in. There's always things going on, that crisis, that are out of your control. So we have to learn to be a new type of business, is agile and fast to change, and also accept that we don't know what's around the corner, and it's going to be another crisis. of something, whatever that is, energy costs, whatever it is, it's now going to be running, we're going to run out of people. So I think you have to figure out how do you maximize, how do you make those downtimes advantageous to you?
I think you're right. And it's very difficult sometimes because you get very comfortable in thinking everything's going to be great and making hay while the sun shines.
You think everything's going to be great forever. Actually, so, or maybe it is going to be great forever, but it could be greater. You could make it bigger. You could change something. Go and find a new angle or a new market or a new way to use your data or do something different. Because there's lots of Betamaxes out there. There's lots of people, 8-track tape, younger folks listening won't know what I'm talking about when I talk about cassette, but 8 tracks versus cassette, whatever it is. There's lots of examples in the history of the BlackBerry phone. Technology that we thought was nailed on, that was going to be the future, which doesn't exist anymore.
The Blockbuster, when there's a Netflix around the corner, do you?
Exactly the point, right? Exactly the point. Blockbuster, who decided not to invest in Netflix because they didn't think it had a future.
Well, Blockbuster were the pin-up child there for a while, weren't they? Because they broke the previous model and then they got broken.
They broke the previous model, but then said, we've got it sorted. What you're talking about is we've got it sorted. They continuously evolve. So I think you have to just keep evolving and always be experimenting and always be, however well you're doing or however badly you're doing, always looking for, okay, what does this mean? How do we need? And I think this AI period is really the challenging one. It's the two challenges. The AI period, the fact that we're going to run out of people in 15 years, right? And I know when I'm telling people that, they're looking at me like I'm a bit mad. But if you go away and look at the data, you look at people like Revelio Labs and the people who count numbers, Deco, who is the CEO of Indeed and Recruit Holdings, he talked about it a week ago and said the single biggest challenge is that in 15 years we're going to run out of people. There's not going to be working people. There's not going to be new people because there's not enough new people coming into the labour market.
But then on the other hand, you hear AI saying you won't be working. We'll all have.
I don't think that's going to be the case. So I really think because we're going to run out of people, we're going to need the extra productivity to stand still in terms of domestic GDP, right? So, and also, does you look at any technological development, however far back you want to go, some jobs are replaced by that technology, but not the people. The people find a different job to do. They either become the people who fix the machines or manage the machines or go and work in the office and do the ordering, whatever it is, it's figuring out, where do I go and what's that next bit? And I don't think, there's as much evidence that AI is creating jobs as it's taking jobs away. You've just got to make sure you have the capacity to move from one of those and recognise one of those areas where it's taking your work away and have the skills to go and where is the work going, right? This is part of the dynamic change we're trying to figure out is what does the job look like? What should we be responsible for? Where's our value? Where's our moat? What do we sell? They're the things we're trying to figure out.
I think, Bill, too, that people have been quick to act. I was reading a post by Glenn Cathy the other day, and he was talking about a report that all, these, can't remember who the companies were, but they'd let people go, done the whole, we're going to go AI. And now they're desperately trying to rehire people because, I guess it's early days as well, but it just wasn't cutting it.
Yeah. So I was talking to Glenn about this the other day, actually, about what it is. And I think you've got a few things going on there. So one is people who've been let go are being rehired, but they're not being rehired at the same salary. There's a lot of that going on in technology. So people will be laid off. They'll have a period of 5-6 months doing whatever they're doing. They'll then be invited back into their old job, but it won't be at the same salary. That's a bit of it. I think we're also only now realising what the actual cost, the token economics of running AI means actually it might have been cheaper to keep the people. Right, so there's lots of things that we're learning because we've never been there where we are reevaluating what's the cost of it and how does the cost compare to the benefit we're gaining.
That's why I find conversations like this so interesting because there's just so many different opinions out there, and it'll be interesting to look back in a few years' time and see which of us were heading in the right direction.
It always is, but at the end of the day, right, God, we trust everyone else bring data, and then data tells me we're going to run out of people in 15 years. And we can't argue with that point. What we've got to figure out, if you run a recruitment business now, you've got to figure out, if we're going to run out of people, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? And does it mean the rarer people get, the greater value I have as a recruiter? Because I do have some people and I do have a network and I do have some data. Does that mean I become more valuable, that I could be more competitive? And what are the services I need to be offering? Because it's probably not going to be placement if there's no people. It's going to be internal mobility. It's going to be running career sites. It's going to be doing all kinds of different things. I think that's what we really got to think about on this single biggest challenge, which is there's not going to be people in the workforce in 15 years. Think about that point. Fundamentally, I can't say it enough to people, and I'm not seeing enough people who are even considering that we're going to run out of people.
But it's not that long, Bill, is it? 15 years.
15 years, right? It was only when I heard someone say, and I think because I've been thinking about demographics for over a decade and what that looks like, but even I hadn't suddenly gone, it's 15 years, that's long, who knows?
I have a 16-year-old daughter, and that seems very quick that she's grown up.
Yeah, so that's like their lifetime. But then you've got to look at it, and then it sounds kind of over dramatic when people say that about running out of people. But you just look at the demographic numbers, and you look at, we've had a whole generation we've gone from averaging 4 children to 1 child a family, right? And we've done that in a 15, 20-year period, and that has a natural impact on the workforce. So I think we need AI to do this because we're not going to have the people. And then we've got to figure out what role the people play in it. And if you're in a recruitment agency business, you need to be thinking about, as the people run out, how are we going to stay relevant? How are we going to make our money? It's going to happen. We have to realise that.
Yeah, and I guess nothing happens, like you say, there's a 15-year, people will realise and catch up before then, because I read similar sorts of studies and I'm fully on board with what you're saying. I don't look at you and think you're mad, Bill. I think the same thing as well, but it does...
It's like kind of having the global warming conversation or the environment conversation. It's like, this isn't one of those where it's going to fix, because there isn't a fix. The only fix there is to develop more of the work through AI, because there's not going to be people to do that work. So redesign jobs, redesign what people do and how they deploy their value. That's what we need to be really thinking about at the moment, in as deep a thought as we can, yeah.
The org chart with the AI in it, I think, is always an interesting concept.
That's already here, a company called Gigged AI, who I speak to quite often, who are quite interesting, and they do contractor workers in technology, but they also have a lot to do with skills profiling and organisational capability, and they now build their family trees with agentic agents and people as the same thing. You do your skills profile based on your agents as well as your people. What's our skill capability of our organisation? I think we're rethinking the workforce as being agents are like people, really. But then, run a recruitment business, open a job board for agents and humans for the skills that you need. There's no reason why you can't do that.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking about that. Maybe a recruitment business will be supplying agents instead of humans.
Well, agents need skills. So think of it like this. 3 of the most successful technology companies in terms of growth are recruitment businesses, essentially. So Mercor, Skilled, there's a couple of others. And they were built to do tech hiring, and they now provide the contractors. Handshake's another one that's doing this on scale. They provide the experts to do AI training tasks to teach the AI. It's a whole new tech sector, and value is being extracted in a different place. Instead of you doing this job because you're excellent at it, you're now teaching AI to be able to do it. Well, there'll come a point where you've industrialised knowledge and you've taught the AI everything you know, and maybe you become surplus to requirement. But we've got to look at it and say, this was a recruitment business and now there's value in AI training, and you're charging for AI training. You've changed whilst delivering the same dynamic, and the value has changed. The value has moved from you doing the work because you knew all about it to you teaching an agentic agent how to do that work. Value changes, and that's what you've got to figure out. Where's the value? Where's it moving? Where's it going? And how do I move myself to be there? And how do I go there and go in that direction, not because I have to, but because I want to. I want to get there and get there first.
Yeah, very interesting. And I was just thinking around the role of AI with what we're doing today in terms of business development. How are you seeing that play out with companies, and the role that AI is playing to maybe break into new markets that I want to head into, or build an existing market that I'm currently playing within?
Yeah, so it's volume, it's outreach, it's targeting, it's messaging on a very personalized scale basis. There's a lot of places that AI can really help you with your business development, lead generation. Where do we go? One of the things we built when we built the automated nursing agency, one of the things we built around that was a principle of wherever we weren't filling bookings, we immediately started hiring. So our marketing and our volume controlled on volume. We built everything around availability. So we identified where we needed to get some new customers, who those customers were, who the decision makers were. So we could be really precision in what we were doing in terms of either sales or marketing activity to try and convert on a one-by-one campaign, really, right? And that's something which I would have always loved to be able to do, but it wasn't physically possible. Now it's possible.
That bespoke marketing campaign just for one.
Yeah, message one, whether that's a candidate or a potential client. How do I deliver? How do I know enough about you? How do I deliver messages, reports, things that are of interest? How do I know when is the right time to call you? How do I know how to run a nurture campaign of giving you a certain number of messages? What do I put on my podcast or my webinar because I want to make sure enough people tune in, right? That stuff just got easy.
And are people leveraging that you've seen, Bill, effectively, or is it still too early days for most?
It's like everything, it's actually catchy. Some people are. We're seeing examples of people leveraging and doing really well and thinking of this way, and more people who aren't yet. And some because they don't know, some because they're scared, some because they don't have the knowledge of how to convert the potential into the opportunity, right? So there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why we get ourselves in, why companies are getting themselves in that position. It's a lot of opportunity. It is this, you have to look on it and say, this is an age that moves very quickly. This is an opportunity to rethink what and how we do things. This is an opportunity to do things better. This is an opportunity to make things better for our people.
And if you're not doing it, somebody else will. It's a bit of a land grab at the moment, isn't it?
And it's going to become more so. The rarer people get, the more value they're going to have. All right, and there's going to reach a point where you can't just keep paying them more money. There'll come a point where they'll go, no, I need to go and get something different from my life. So we really have to think about it. We really have to think about how do I, over the next 15 years while people are running out, become that employer of choice where people want to stay. And I think all of those things, although we're going to talk about it in a painful way, is going to be very good for the working environment because people are making changes that they need to make. Not because morally they feel they should, because they know they haven't got any choice. And so I think we're going to see a lot of change around people and how people are looked after and what goes on in jobs. And I'm here for that.
You are here for that. And Bill, so you've been really deep in that whole tech world and investment world. And I'd love to know some of the really interesting things that you're seeing, different, like interesting companies, different players, different use cases, just what the stuff that's kind of making you go.
Well, it's user cases. So I talked to you about Merkle, right? Merkle started out, the guys who are there, and they're worth about $2.5 billion now, I think. And the company's not that much bigger now. It's still essentially three guys who left university like 2 or 3 years ago. Now, they had decided and they went into Y Combinator and they wanted to do tech recruiting, and then they couldn't deal with the volume of the test, so they built some agents and some technology to do tech recruiting. And now they use the tech to identify experts in everything and organise contracts through an automated platform of people to basically train the internet. $50, $200 an hour. Right? That's Merkle once, and there's 10 of those companies that were worth billions each that were agencies. So do you have the capacity to identify where the next opportunity is and where your value is? I think they were able to then use that technology to identify experts. And then once they'd identified the experts, instead of trying to place them, they sold the services, the outcome, the brokerage, the percentage of the salary. Smart. It's all smart stuff.
Yeah, talk about reinventing the wheel, going back to, first principles and redesigning things. And it's probably in some ways easier for these kids who are coming out of university looking at with totally fresh eyes than people who were, when we're a little bit older, we're more entrenched in the traditional way.
I think that's the problem, is that we think that's the case, right? I think as we get older, we get more commitments, we become more risk averse because we have more at stake. There's more at risk, once you've got family, you've got things to pay for, you've got bills to pay and stuff like that. Your appetite to take risk diminishes a little bit. So I think there's a reason why young people coming into the market is good, but I see no reason why you can't be an entrepreneur and start your own business at 60 as you can at 18, apart from whether you'll have to convince people to give you the money and stuff like that. But I think this is where age demographics, declining population means we're having to rethink those things. What's old, what's young, what's right, who should be leading things. I think that's really where we're at.
It's a whole new world in so many different ways, Bill, and the leverage that you could or have been able to maintain and leverage with AI, let's call it, helped you do a lot of things faster, quicker. You could do a little bit more with your time. And where we're up to now is that whole new world yet again with agentic AI, which does stuff by itself without being told,
It's different because it does the work. All the technology we've had so far has either supported the work or directed the work. It's made it easier, but it said these are the things you need to do. Now it just does them. So it's different.
We'd be thinking differently now that opportunity is there, Bill. I mean, what should we be thinking as recruitment leaders?
Well, I think one is you've got to think about what your value is. That's the first thing. What's our moat? What protects our business and makes sure we come back next week, next year, 5 years? What's our moat? Has that moved? Is the technology moving it? Is the technology threatening our existence? Which in a lot of cases it is. Because is it becoming easier, cheaper, costless to do the things which we're getting paid? And then I think once you've started to get that, you then have to look at your business and think, do we have the mindset and the technology stack to deliver this next bit? How do we do it, Companies like HackerJob, who launched an agentic agent called Archer that does screening and interviewing and putting candidates forward and talent. They did 2 million ARR in 90 days, unheard of. But they came out of an agency background and then they built a marketplace. So then the marketplace became more dynamic and they moved into a position where actually, and they're a really good example, HackerJob, really, if you look at their business and you look at Archer, because their limitation to scale as a tech recruiting marketplace was they had a team of people who did the candidate sourcing, but they were getting better and better at doing automated sourcing through marketing, through a different type of funnel for tail, bringing people into the business in a different way compared to picking the phone up and saying, got a job, do you want to come and have a conversation, blah, blah, blah. The way that we've always done things. They then went to agentic, and when they went to agentic, the team that they had sourcing candidates and curating candidates and putting them into the marketplace, the number of people they could process went up by about 30x compared to the human team they had. But the humans now, they're all still employed in the business. The volume of what's achieved is X, whatever, on a daily basis, just skill, capacity, volume for what you can do. Those people now are the appeals team. And what that means is if you are, there's a big thing with the EU AI Act, that you have to have transparency. You have to have answer, you have to have a right of appeal, right? So if I match you with an algorithm, I have to show you transparency of how that score is calculated and what it is. And you have to have the opportunity to challenge that if you choose to. If you choose to say, no, that information or that scoring is incorrect and these are the reasons, you have the opportunity to do that. Now, what that means in the HackerJob business is all the people who used to curate people, they could all be laid off if you wanted to lay them all off, or they could be employed to do something different. Well, they're all employed to do something different. That's very real. And the scale of the whole operation is doing 10, 20x in terms of the registration. I think those opportunities of identifying that is massively exciting.
It was Archer, and what was the other one, Bill?
That's HackerJob. They're called HackerJob. And they have Archer and 2 other agentic. But they were a tech marketplace, and now they run agentic agents. But it's quite an interesting story because they launched 3 agents on the same day that did different parts of the hiring process without knowing which one was going to win. And Archer, which does the intake, it's a pre-apply layer, qualifies people, gets the double opt-in, decides who should apply for a job and who shouldn't, sits outside the ATS intentionally by design. That's where the market is. That's what everybody wants all of a sudden.
Yeah, and these are creating future style businesses that we should all be looking at and understanding what they're doing, because I think there's a big chasm between that and, the most...
I think part of it is being an explorer. That's a fundamental skill, right? So the worst piece of advice I hear, and I hear this all the time, I hear people banging on about this all the time, is if you have children, you should advise them to go to a trade school. Tell them to go and learn to be a plumber or to be a bricklayer or whatever, And if that's what they want to do, if my children ever wanted to do that, I would have supported them to do that. But I'm very glad that they didn't. I told them all to go and be computer programmers. And they're 28 and 26. They have an artist and a historian. And that's cool. Almost the opposite of the advice I would have given them. Actually, I think what we're going to need, what do we lack in society is creativity. We lack really intelligent thought to be able to differentiate between fact and fiction, to be able to have a reasoned discussion and position yourselves. These are the things I want to see in society being evolved and developed, affording the opportunity that actually we don't have to do that work because technology is taking away the heavy lifting stuff. And I think if we can start getting that, if you've got kids, tell them to go to art college, learn to paint, do something different. Don't just say to them, yeah, every parent is telling their kids, oh, well, plumbers, these plumbers, go and learn to be a plumber. I'm like, oh, right.
Teach them how to deal with change, I think is a big one.
Yeah, it's how things change. We encourage people to do what they want to do. We talk about where we have shortage, but we can't make people do things. We have to create a desire and a passion for people who want to go there. I think the other thing is we need to have empathy for people who have fear of the new world, fear of where we're at, and fear of looking stupid because you're worried about the question you're going to ask. Because, I remember when I first went on a board meeting and I was a paid advisor, and I first went on a board meeting with a PE company who bought companies. And they spoke in different anagrams that I'd never heard of before, when they were talking about EBITDA, because I'd always been in operational businesses and at quite a senior director level. But I didn't ever feel like I could suddenly put my hand up and say, I don't really know what EBITDA is. Can you explain that to me? Right. So I was writing stuff down and going away and Googling and going, right, what, and talking to people, going, what is that? And how does that work? And you kind of learn. And I think we have to, I've always taken from that how do we go back to creating those environments and those workspaces where people aren't afraid to say, I don't know what that means, so I don't understand that, I don't feel that I'm stupid if I don't know that or I ask this question.
Well, I mean, there's so much now, isn't there? You and I were chatting before we came on live, Bill, and I was saying I was on a Claude course this morning building AI agents and stuff, and I felt, which was great, but I felt like when I came off it, I realized how much more I didn't know. And I think we're realizing we don't know so much. I think there is becoming a bit more of a free space.
Yeah, but just be wary with it because lots of people are trying to pretend it's witchcraft, because if we pretend it's witchcraft, we can charge more money. And it's been the same over time when that was talent sourcing, whatever it is, we have to make you feel like it's complicated because then you won't try and do it yourself and you'll pay for it. So don't get intimidated by that, by what your experience was.
That's really good advice.
Simple as me talking to a technology and having a conversation with it.
It's so true, Bill, because in some ways it is so very simple. And then other ways, if you look at it through a different lens, there's just so much to it. But if you strip it back to the basics, like you say, just like recruitment, strip recruitment back to the basics. And Andrew says this a lot too, what problem are you trying to solve? And then go out and find the thing that's going to help you do that.
It's hard work. but it's easy mechanics. Hard work because we deal with people, and people are the most unpredictable product you can have. They will, if they can possibly do something which isn't what you planned or expected as the next step, then they'll do that. And that doesn't matter whether that's the client or the applicant, candidate, or whatever it is.
Such an interesting conversation, Bill. Is there anything else that you would like to say? I'd love to know a little bit. You did talk a little bit about your workshop, but let's maybe hear a bit more about them.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing. So this is new. So I spoke as the keynote at the Canadian Staffing Summit few months ago, and I was talking about agentic AI and the opportunity and what agencies need to look like. And it became pretty clear that a lot of people were coming to me and saying, how can we get more of this? Like, it's great to see you for half an hour or 40 minutes, but how do we get more of this? So I started looking about what workshops would look at, and I think what people need. And there's been a generation of recruiters who haven't got that, some of whom are running businesses now. They haven't been in that disciplined corporate environment of how we built the recruitment businesses, how we built the brands, everything from the numbers to the activity to the volume, right? So that's the first thing, is looking at the old school. What are the old things that used to make hiring work? The vacancy take-home form, 8 IDs in an interview, identifying factors, whatever. The basic rules that we taught. And then how do we convert that into workflow? So it might be automated, it might be delivered by people, but how do we make sure that the fundamentals are embedded in everything that we do and we have an understanding of value? So I'm going to spend time at the workshops. One is understanding that. The other one is we're going to have 2 days pre-course, which is really a hackathon to build a workflow. And we'll be building workflows in NAN or Lovable or something like that. But I'm actually going to help people build a single workflow for their business.
That's awesome. And so do you have some details you could share, Bill, or what's the best way?
At the moment, I'm just doing it in Canada.
Okay.
But if somebody went, you know what, I'll do these things anywhere. So if someone came back and said, we want you to do it in Queensland, or we want you to do it in Melbourne or Sydney, can you come and do it with our business? Or we think we have a dozen people that will pay $100 to do something, then I would gladly come and do it. And it's old school, new cool. How do you take the base? What are the basic principles? What's the value? What's your mode? And how do you translate that into an AI?
That sounds amazing and very much needed. And Andrew and I know just as well from speaking to so many consultants, they're like sponges at the moment, and founders trying to work out what's there. So that's amazing. All right. So you'll let me know in good, and I can just share that around online.
And just out to me, on LinkedIn, if anyone's listening, just reach out to me.
Yeah, that's lovely. I always love the take you have on things, Bill. You're such a deep thinker and futurist, and I don't know anybody who's been in recruitment longer than you. So you've seen so much, and I love your ground.
I was just very fortunate. It was a very exciting time. So when I started working in agencies, there was no specialization. It was secretaries. That's what agencies did when I started, And probably the discipline of a recruitment company, although they'd been around for centuries, the actual disciplines of offices and recruitment offices where people sat and generated jobs and things like that was about 20 years in London. So I came into an industry that was about 20, 30 years old, right? It was very new. There was no specialization, so you didn't have technology specialists you didn't have a specialist discipline for every different thing. And then we started doing temps, we started doing industrial, we started doing perm, health. And so I lived through a building period. I lived through a building period where we got the first BMSs. I lived through a building period where we got the first databases. I lived through a building period where we got the first of pretty much anything you can think of that's come. I was around when that was the change. Getting a database, getting a computer, moving from getting a mobile phone. I used to have to walk around with a pager in my pocket because I was a manager. I could have a pager that would buzz. Most people listening in today will have no idea what that is. We've been through all of these changes, and we've figured it out. So I think being old gives you that wisdom, I guess.
You're not old yet, Bill. Plenty of petrol in that tank yet. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got a lot that
No
you've
problem.
got your hands into. And yeah, it's an absolute delight getting to meet you, because I've never met you before, and to hearing what you have to say. Lots of pearls of wisdom in there, Bill. Thank you.
I appreciate it. But thank you both.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of The Tech Savvy Recruiter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest recruitment trends and insights, make sure that you remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to speak to Andrew about turning your tech stack into your secret weapon, or myself around creating an agency that delivers you more money, more meaning, and more freedom, we'd absolutely love to chat. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for your support.